talked about, let's see, user stories. We talked about refining our user stories. We talked about getting estimates for how long the software development was going to take. Then we came up with iterations, and we were really, really happy because it all sort of fit together. You could take user stories and their estimates came together, and you created iterations, and this was great, fantastic, wonderful stuff. And then last class we talked about velocity, and that's what mucked the whole dang thing up, right? We entered the whole real world into it, and we went, oh man, that sucked. But we rolled with it, right? We adjusted our estimates. We got some real world numbers in there. We went back to our iterations, and we laid it out. And when we last left in our last class, we had once again built an iteration plan, 1, 2, 3, that sort of looked like it would probably work. Rock and roll, fantastic. So we're done, right? We create the iteration plan, and the software magically shows up, right? Bing. There you go. I got a plan, so thus I should have software, right? No, not quite, right? So what we actually have to do now is we have to move to sort of the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. We actually have to develop the software. Well, fantastic. You know, so writing the software is one thing, of course, but also we have to keep track of the software development process. Does anything ever go like it's supposed to? No. And is it entirely possible that if you're working as part of a software development team, there might be, I don't know, like a boss that would come to you every once in a while and say, hey, what are you doing? How's it going? More importantly, you know, I have expectations that at the end of this iteration you're going to be delivering some code to me, right? And what are you going to tell your boss when he comes to you and asks you that? Sure, not a problem. It's all good. Until such time as you get to the end of the iteration and there's nothing to show for it, right? Isn't that the shortest job you've ever had in your entire life, right? So we would prefer to make sure that your job is not a short job. Should you be the one who's tapped on the shoulder to keep track of what's going on? So let's see if we can give you some software development project planning tools that might help you save your job. Sound like a fair deal? Okay. So this is our iteration example, and I believe, let's see, 30 days, 25 days, 25 days. Remember, we got 2 developers and working on this stuff like this. This is where we ended last time. What it really was pretty much what we'd said was, listen, we had a beautiful one where we packed like 4 user stories into each iteration. Remember that? Great story. Just unfortunately in the real world it didn't work, right? So we went back and we created this one, right? So we still have 3 iterations. Okay, we can live with that. But in each one of these iterations, we now have 2 user stories. But you know, the thing is we feel pretty confident about this, right? What was it? It was like 28, we had been 40 days in iteration because we have 2 developers, right? And there's 20 days in a month and other. But we went back and we factored in a velocity of, I think it was like 0.7, right? And so that whole beautiful 40-day thing sort of shrunk down to like 28 days is actually what we had. So we went back and we figured out what our estimates were, and we sort of fit everything in, ching, 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 ching. So this is actually a pretty good schedule. But remember, a schedule is just what you have at the start. Now you actually have to go ahead and do the work. And during the process of doing the work, the challenge is going to be, so how's it going? One of the reasons that you want to track how things are going is because if things go off the rails, if they start going in the wrong direction, you would prefer to know about that sooner rather than later, right? And if things start to go off the rails, you need to take some sort of action or tell somebody or do something. The last thing you want to do is hit the end of a software development project and go to the developers and say, hey, great, where's the code? And they go, well, not done yet, and you're surprised. Surprise is never a good thing in the real world. Oh, yeah, that never happens. All right. So how are we going to manage our software development project? There's 1,001 different ways to do that. But they all sort of come down to the same thing. What you need is exactly what you already have in your car. You need a dashboard. Dashboard in the car is sort of a handy thing, right? Yeah. You look down and you can find out what the status of, well, how fast you're going. Sort of explain those flashing lights that you see in your rearview mirror. Whoops, I didn't know about that. Gas. It's always good to know how much gas you have, right? So the engine temperature, whatever that is, as long as that doesn't change, right? I have no idea what engine temperature means, but it should always peg right there in the middle, right? Yeah. If you got one of them, there are fancy cars that has a dash that can talk to you, can tell you what, like air pressure in your tires, so that's always a good thing. Something to do with oil. If anything has to do with oil comes on, it must be a really bad thing, right? So overall, you use a dashboard arguably every day to see what's going on in your car. Well, it seems like if you're part of or running a software development project, it would be handy to have a dashboard so you could glance at it and start to see how things are going. That make sense? Yeah. That's good. All right. So we want to track actually 3 things in our fabulous, fantastic, made-up world of software development. First off, what work is in the pipeline? In other words, work that you need to do that you've not yet started. Okay? And arguably, that will be the biggest chunk of work for the longest time, right? Your software development project has all this. Remember, we've got 3 iterations, right? Okay, so potentially you got a lot of stuff, and you don't be working on it all at once. What's being worked on? So in other words, what's the actual software developers sitting at their desks are actually doing right now? Okay? And, of course, hopefully, fingers crossed, a pile that's going to be growing as you go along, what's been completed. Okay? If you can keep track of those 3 things, it seems like you have pretty much your finger on the pulse of how the software development project is going. Man. All right, well, that's good. Ideally, your software development dashboard is going to be out in a public area. This is not a secret. This is something that you want everybody in your software development team pretty much see every single day. Arguably, they're all contributing to it, right? You want them to be aware of where everybody is at, because you want them to go, wow, you know, I'm falling behind, or I'm in front, or, you know, here's where we're at. You want everybody to see the status. You don't want status to be a hidden, tucked away in the bottom of the closet type of thing. You want it to be a very, very public thing, because arguably the entire team's going to be judged based on how it goes, right? So, you know, we want to make sure everybody knows what's up. All right, so what does a dashboard look like? Congratulations, this is what a dashboard looks like. It's got 6 different sections to it. So let's take a look at what we got here. Right over here, we have our user stories. So we store our user stories here. Obviously not full paragraphs or anything like that. But we'll store a tag that says, you know, for example, pay with Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, support 3,000 concurrent users. If I recall correctly, let's see if I got this right here. That's what we have in our first iteration. Is that correct? Yeah. All right, we got them on our dashboard now. All right. Well, we have our estimates for each one of them there. That's pretty good. This is where we'll put on these surprises. As we start to work on things, we're going to move them to the center area. We have something called a burn down chart that we'll talk about in just a moment right here. This would be anything that doesn't make it into this iteration. Things change. And if we go, whoa, we're just not going to be able to do that this time out, we would move it over to our next area. We're not going to lose it. We're not going to forget about it. It's not going to drop off the face of the earth. We move it over there. And this is our ultimate goal. When we complete the user story, we're going to move it here. And hopefully that'll get crowded very quickly, full of completely done software. So the whole concept with a software development dashboard is you can look at it, and you've got a pretty good understanding of where everything's at in your project right now. Make sense? Okay. All right, so the burn down chart. This is actually really, really important because it's got numbers, and we all like numbers, right? So burn down chart is extraordinarily simple. It says, so where are you? So you start here. We're saying it's going to take us 88 days to do iteration 1. And remember, we've got 2 staffers and stuff like that. 88 days to get it done. When it's done, we'll have 0 days left. Obviously, we've got all the work done. We have the number of days left in the iteration, and you can see 80, 60, 40, and 20 there. And this is arguably the work left. It could be anything. It could be a percentage. It could be days. It could be anything like that. Okay, and what's going to happen is we're not going to follow this line. If you had an army of robots working on your software development project, you'd have no problem following that line. Sadly, there's just not enough armies of robots out there anymore. So you're going to use human beings who are fallible and who make mistakes and who, you know, sometimes do a better job than you would expect and sometimes do a lesser job. No matter what, you're going to be tracking this line. You'll be above it, you'll be below it, and stuff like that. If you're above it, then you're running behind. If you're below it, congratulations, you're actually ahead. So you'll spend most of your life above the line, probably. Make sense? Try. All right, so we have these user stories. You have documented them. You have collected them. You have gotten your estimates. You've had your discussions with your users. Now it's time for you to get rid of your user stories. It's time for you to actually find one of your software developers and hand it off to them and go, here, this is now your user story. Raise it, feed it, send it to college. And, no, right. But it is their responsibility to implement. Make sense? Trick question. You're wrong. Okay. The reason is because a user story is potentially a really big thing, right? I mean, remember, user stories are written in whose language? The customer's uneducated, right? The customer doesn't know squat about your software development methodology. They don't know that you have somebody who's a specialist in the database, and you have somebody who's a specialist in updating the user interface, and somebody who's really great at creating code. Okay? Arguably, if you have those three people, potentially all three of those people will come together to implement a single story. So what it means is that the granularity is a little bit messed up here, right? User stories are created by and for the user. Every single story is really probably thought of as a collection of tasks. And there's a brand new word. A task is work that's going to be done by one developer, okay, as part of the user story. So if you get the understanding here, that means each user story has a bunch of tasks, which means each user story has a bunch of individual things that a software developer is going to do. So we're basically taking a user story and busting it up into a bunch of pieces that then individual software developers can work on. Okay? Each task is going to have a title, a rough description, and then an estimate. So if my user story is like 20 staff days to get it done, and I've got 5 tasks, then potentially each task will take 4 days. 4 days to basically get it. Something like that. You know, it's not necessarily going to work out perfectly like that, but you get the gist of it. Okay? But you know, the cool thing is that now you can have more than just one developer working on a single user story. Make sense? That's how we get stuff. All right. So here's our Pay with Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal user story. Remember, we've been talking about this forever and ever and ever. Well, maybe that's too big of a task for one software developer. Maybe we should break it up into Pay with Visa, Pay with MasterCard, and Pay with PayPal. Perhaps those are 3 separate types of tasks. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and break it up. It was 10, 3, 3, and 5. Well, that's not quite adding up, is it? We're so hard in these estimates. Now they're not adding up. Well, this is exactly what you should expect to occur. So look, when we came up with an estimate for the user story, we really didn't have an awful lot of insights into exactly what that meant. It was some software developer was giving us their best guess as to what it was going to take to implement that feature. Well, we've gone back to the software developers and we've asked them to sort of break it up into the individual tasks, which they've done for us. Thank you very, very much. We greatly appreciate that. Now we've also gone back to them and said, great, now that you've broken it up into the tasks, can you give me an estimate for each one of those tasks? So there's a little bit more resolution, a little bit more finer detail as to exactly what type of software development needs to be done here. And so these numbers down here, I would argue, are more accurate than that number up there. What we need to do now is throw away the user story estimate and replace it with the sum of the task estimates. And the reason is because the software developers have had more time to think about it. Now they understand that that user story is really sort of 3 separate tasks, and they've got a closer feel for what it's going to take to implement those individual tasks. Okay? Just enough information to describe what the work is. Okay, I think we're there. Task must cover all of the user story's functionality. So the sum of those 3 together take care of everything that's in that actual user story. And of course, we've got an estimate for each one of the tasks. We making sense? Just busting big rocks into little rocks is what we're doing. Okay. Okay, now, once again, we talked about this, what happens when your estimates don't agree. You have an estimate for the user story, and you have a sum of the estimates for each one of your tasks. Okay? Once again, it comes down to confidence. You're trying to get the best possible estimates that you can. Those task estimates are going to give you a little bit more confidence, because now your software developers have a better understanding of what actually has to be done, and that's what they're estimating. Arguably, you create those tasks as early on in the process as possible, right? Because the earlier on that you can get the software developers to think about exactly what they're going to have to do to implement this user story, the more accurate their estimates are going to be. Okay? Task estimates are what you go with. Throw away the user story estimates now. They were good. They were a good placeholder, but they're not nearly as accurate as your task estimates. So task estimates are what you're going to hang your hat on. All right. Now, when you do your task estimates, you're going to have brand new numbers for your estimates, right? So what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to go back to your burn down chart. Remember, this was what, like 88? So now we've updated it to 89. And the reason we're doing that is because we've got more accurate information. So we took our user stories, we broke them up into tasks, we re-estimated the tasks. When we added the numbers together for the tasks, we have brand new estimates, higher or lower, can go either way, depending on what's going on with some of that. when we have all those new estimates, we go back to our burn down chart, and we update the total amount of time it's going to take to complete this particular iteration, because we want to be fairly accurate in what's going on. So we're good to go. Okay, so now we go back to our software development dashboard. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to place our tasks in the user story section. So what we've done is we've replaced where we had a user story, which is pay with Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and we've replaced it with basically the 3 tasks that make up that user story. Alright? Now, once again, if any of these user stories, for whatever reason, because of schedule changes or planning issues or anything like that, if they get bumped and we're not going to be able to actually implement it in this particular iteration, we will just move them over here and we'll put them here. And when we do that, we know that they're there, we understand that we're actually not going to be implementing, but we've not forgotten about them. And that's actually the most important thing. You would probably change the burn down. Now, the interesting question, if they got bumped, why did they get bumped? Okay, did you actually just lose a week? I'm sorry, we lost power to the building, so nobody can come in for a week. In that case, yes, you would do it. More often than not, what's going to happen is something else is going to come in, and it's going to take up the time that you would have spent on that. So potentially your burn down chart might not change. Now, what you're actually going to deliver at the end could be completely different, right? Because stuff changed. Make sense?
Yeah, so 3,000 users, you could have the more practical thing for that.
It could be. It could also be security is suddenly become a huge issue because another shack in the middle of a lake got hacked or something like that.
So I would actually ramp up the burn down chart because more work.
Potentially, but also if I replace support 3,000 users with make my site secure.
Replace it.
Right, exactly. Because once again, you can do anything you want, but that iteration is effectively a fixed size. So if I need to have the software at the end of the iteration, then the iteration can't change the size. What I do during the iteration, I'm the user, I can change anything I want, right? Okay. You got it. Cool, so now we've got our user stories, we've got our tasks, they're all here, we're good to go with this. So we're going to do exactly what you would expect us to do. First off, what we're going to do is we're going to start to assign each one of these tasks to a developer. So we'll put their initials on each one of the tasks. So, I mean, look, especially if you have a large, complex software development project, you're going to forget who's doing what. It gets confusing very quickly, okay? So we're going to go ahead and put initials on here so we can remember what's going on. Pay with Visa and pay with MasterCard are currently in progress, which means if I walked over to the desk of either one of these software developers, I would expect to find them working on these particular pieces of code. There's another task, pay with PayPal. I've assigned it to a developer, but that developer is doing something else at this point in time and they're not working on it. So instead of moving it out and having somebody not work on it, I leave it over here so that mentally I can go, okay, look, I know exactly what's going on in our project. This is going to go to somebody, but it hasn't gone yet, so nobody's actually working on it. I've got 2 developers working on this stuff, and we're good to go. And I'll be updating my burn down chart as I go along. Okay? You really want to be accurate about what work is being done. If somebody has something to do but they're not working on it, make sure that you don't put it out in the in progress area, because otherwise you're going to be fooling yourself that you're making more progress than you really are. Can a developer work on 2 things at one time? The answer is yes, they can, but you have to be a little bit careful here, okay? Welcome to the real world, okay? The 2 tasks actually have to be closely related, right? Do something with this value and then do something else with the value. Fantastic. Those tasks can both go to the same development, right? If it's an output of one and an input to another, it's actually a good thing probably for them to be working on. One of the inputs and outputs, double up tasks should affect the same part of the software. That's actually sort of a critical thing. You know, if I have something going off the user interface and something going off the database, those aren't necessarily really related. And having the same developer work on both of those things at the same time would probably be not the most efficient way to do it. Okay? You don't want to double up on tasks that have a large estimate. So if I have a particular task that ends up having like 20 days or 15 days or something associated with it, that's crazy long, and I don't want to be saying, hey, I got another 10-day task, could you work on it at the same point in time, right? Because you're expecting that that developer is not going to have any extra bandwidth to work on a separate task. What's going to actually happen is you'll assign 2 tasks to them, and they will work on one, and the other one will sit on their desk. So they won't really be working on 2 tasks at the same time, but you will have fooled yourself that they are. So yeah, you can have people work on 2 things at one time. Just be very, very careful about how you do it, and make sure that those 2 things are closely related to each other. Multiple user stories. This is exactly what we expected to have happen. So remember, this is our Pay with Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. So we're out here. We knew that. Well, actually, I think PayPal has now come into the mix. We're still working on the Visa one, and Pay with MasterCard is now complete. So it's going to hang out here. We will put the tasks here as they complete. Okay. Meanwhile, support 3,000 concurrent users. All 3 of those tasks are currently in progress. Note, based on the initials, we've got different people working on everything, okay? Which is exactly what we would expect to happen. So, and also, oh, hey, look at your burn down chart. So you've been tracking stuff on your burn down chart. You can see that you've been running a little bit behind schedule for most of the project, which is really arguably what you'd sort of expect. But you're making progress and you're getting close towards the end. So this is all good stuff, right? So would you say this is a fairly good representation of what's going on in our software development project? Okay. Okay, so place tasks on dashboard, so this is good stuff. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So we got a big blank space. Why here? Oh, because we finished Pay with MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal, and we moved it down here. This is where we put our completed user stories. We take all of our tasks and we put them right there, so they're good to go. We're taking care of that. Notice that 3,000 concurrent users. Good news, we've completed 1 of the tasks, and 2 of the tasks are still in progress. And we went ahead and updated the burn down chart as we went along. Ching, 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 ching. So we're doing exactly what we'd expect to have happen. We're moving through our software development project. We're getting to where we need to be. And that would be perfect if it wasn't for the fact that life comes up and slaps you upside your house and yourself. Just when you got something cool like this going on, bam, you're going to get unplanned things. No matter how carefully you plan what you want to do, no matter how many people you talk to, no matter how carefully you put all that stuff together, you will have unplanned activities occur. Okay? Okay, when unplanned activities occur, you got a couple different choices here. You can sort of slide it in around what you're doing and not talk about it, or you can say, stop. I'm going to treat this just like I treat everything else. It's effectively another user story that you're likely to implement. Okay? And if you do it that way, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to keep track of how that unplanned activity interacts with all the planned stuff that you're doing. Okay? You gotta understand it's going to affect your burn down rate. Every hour, day, whatever you spend working on the unplanned thing is going to take away an hour a day from what you thought you were going to be working on. It's going to take away from work being done on user stories because you're going to be working on something else, and it's going to have a lot of other effects going on. Alright, so let's see how we handle this. Okay, down here, the lower left-hand corner, we have a space reserved for unplanned activities. Getting the hint that they happen a lot, we have a reserved space for them. Cool, so we've decided that, user decided that wants to do a trade show demo of the software. Okay, great. So what does that mean? Well, we have to create a demo script and we have to practice the demo. Okay. It's not that big of a hit. It's 1 day to create the demo script and 2 days to practice it. Okay, that's fine. So we figure out what's going on. We're going to want to actually move them over here because actually we're going to be spending time working on it. So we go to here. Boop. All right. Now a couple of interesting things here. KLR is the software developer who's been assigned to create the demo script. KLR had been working on specifying the servers that we're going to use for our 3,000 concurrent users. It was out here, since it can't do 2 things at once, because they're completely unrelated things, we're going to take what he was working on, pull it back over here. It's going to be basically in hold. We're going to indicate that he's working on this over here, and we'll keep moving these over as they work on it. Now remember, the whole purpose of your software development dashboard is to make sure that you have an accurate view of what's going on with your project. Got it? Remember, you got moving parts, gears, and wheels, and all sorts of stuff going on, and it can get out of control pretty quickly if you're not careful. Cool. All right, so what did we cover today, guys? We went over the software development dashboard. Okay? We talked about what a burn down chart is. We talked about our brand new friend, tasks. Remember, we take user stories and we break them up into tasks. Tasks are more granular. Tasks are more specific about what's been going on. And tasks get re-estimated. And it's the estimate that you come up with for your tasks that you'll start using as you go forward. So you're going to take the estimate that you had for your user story, throw it away. It was great while it lasted. Don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to take the sum of the tasks for that particular user story. I'm going to say that that's actually what my estimate is as I go forward. And we said, hey, the world is real, the world throws stuff at us, we will have unplanned tasks that will come in and will interfere with our really well-designed software development plan. And when that happens, we're going to treat those like we treat all other user stories, and we're going to incorporate them in. We also understand if we're currently working on things that didn't account for the unplanned activities come in, we may stop, work on some of those things, and we'll move that back into sort of the holding pen. We'll work on the unplanned activity. When the unplanned activity is done, then we can get right back up on that horse and ride it again. Make sense? Yeah. Rock and roll. So now you have a secret weapon to keep track of software development on a project basis. And ultimately, that's how you're going to get from those user stories and estimates to actually a finished product. Make sense? Yeah. What are we going to do next time? We're going to talk about the single responsibility rule. We're going to keep it dry. Don't repeat yourself. And we're going to be talking about something I don't feel very strongly enough, good enough design. Is there perfect design? Well, there is, but you'll never get to it, sorry. Is there good enough? Yeah. Do you think the world can live with good enough? Yeah. Man, if you want to deliver software, you better be able to, right? It works. Fantastic. Now, I seem to recall you guys are working on homework, is that correct? Yes. How many people have it done? All right, and when's it due? Tuesday. And you don't want to be working on it when? Monday night. I got this cautionary note, just a cautionary note. You're going to turn in a listing of the program. You're going to turn in a listing of screenshots, listings, whatever, of your run of 3 data sets, right? Might even put a staple in the upper left-hand corner, tape it all together. All right, and it's due at the beginning of class on not Thursday. Tuesday, not end of class, but Tuesday. Got it? Fabulous. Why don't we take a break? We'll come back, we'll talk about a little bit of Python, and I will see you back here at about 10 till.